So there have been brief moments of journalists doing a good job with this Israel-Gaza conflict. Early on, Jake Tapper on CNN was defending Palestinian civilians in a way that's more aggressive than I've ever seen from anybody on mainstream media. But since then, it's actually gotten worse because you would expect the commentary to become more sympathetic to Palestinians as time goes by because so many innocent civilians are being killed by Israel. But if anything, the opposite's happened. If anything, it's become like more of what you would have expected from the beginning. More like Israel's our ally, let's defend them. I mean, you have CNN literally doing ride-alongs with the IDF, and then IDF has to give them approval as to whether or not they could post the segment. Caitlin Collins had that on her show the other day. You got this story coming out where they're doing like a $50 million blitz of CNN where they're trying to get ahead of the narrative and really paint the picture about Hamas. So in other words, they're trying to say like paint the Israeli perspective and like, don't give the Palestinian perspective at all. So it's really bad. But there are still examples. I just want to be clear that print media has done a relatively solid job with some exceptions. But here we have an example of a BBC reporter who, in my opinion, he's acting in the way that every reporter should be acting when dealing with this conflict. So he's going to talk to an Israeli spokesperson, and look what happens.
Because it's a convenient response, isn't it, that every time there is an Israeli strike on some sort of facility inside Gaza, you just tell us that Hamas is operating there and that's why you're fighting back. We understand that.
I'm sorry.
The UN here, though, is saying that its facility, the UN, internationally recognised body, the UN says that its facility in Gaza was attacked by your forces overnight and this morning reporting a significant number of deaths. The point is that is in contravention of international humanitarian law and people need somewhere that is safe to go if you are telling them to evacuate from the north of Gaza.
I have to push back because the insinuation in your question is that Israel takes pleasure at taking potshots at civilian facilities.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that every response you make to my suggestion that you are targeting people when they are trying to find somewhere safe to go is that you tell me Hamas is operating there. This is a UN facility.
Because, Ben, Hamas has spent the last 16 years embedding itself underneath civilian areas in Gaza, building its headquarters under the hospital, exploiting ambulances, putting its own, our troops have just discovered rocket launchers and weapon silos inside schools, inside classrooms, next to children's bedrooms.
So that justifies attacking those targets, even though there are, as we've seen this morning, babies in the hospital. We've seen that innocent civilians are in the UN facilities.
It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. And his first point is actually devastating because he said, look, you keep saying all you do is bring up Hamas anytime I talk about the civilians that you're targeting and the various civilian infrastructure that you're targeting. But the most recent example is it was a UN facility with nothing else around it. So there was no even plausible argument of like, well, the place next to it had Hamas ammunition or something. No, it was the UN facility and there's nothing around it. And we know that at the UN facility there's not Hamas and you guys attacked it anyway. So in other words, look, if your reaction is just Hamas, no matter what, it's not going to work. When we're seeing the death and destruction at the colossal level that we're seeing it right now, look, I just want to remind everybody, I'm going to pull it up. I've showed you guys this a million times, but I'm showing you it for a reason because it's something there everybody should know. I mean, look at this. This is, and by the way, these numbers are probably lagging behind because a lot of the infrastructure that's used to count the deaths has now been like these places are under attack and the people who collect the data are not safe anymore either. So this is probably lagging. But as of right now, it's 13,421 civilians dead, including 6,220 children, 3,412 women, 49 murdered journalists. You go on here, 68 damaged mosques, 3 churches that were bombed, 117 press quarters, 221 damaged schools, 821 factories that are bombed, 408 health staff that were targeted, including 198 deaths among doctors, nurses, and paramedics. And then you have, 115 health facilities targeted, including 21 hospitals. So, look, at a certain point, anybody with a brain is going to go, I don't think your catch-all answer of Hamas is necessarily convincing. It looks like you're trying to do a lot of this on purpose. And the fact of the matter is this. I'm sure Hamas is sprinkled in with the civilian population, of course. But the point is, Israel looks like they decided we're going to press the button, even if there's 3 Hamas guys in there and 20 innocent civilians. And that's the point that this journalist is making. They're like, look, your response is not sufficient. Your response is absurd. Could you imagine Russia making the same argument or Iran making the same argument? Everybody would rightly say, no, you're just war criminals. You just don't care about civilian casualties. You're fine with killing civilians. And so, again, great job to that journalist. Everybody else needs to take notes. They need to take notes. I told you my general rule of thumb is like if you have 1 out of every 10 people, 10% of the deaths are civilians in your bombing campaign. It's like, that's horrible. But I could maybe see an argument that like, wait, hey, we were trying our goddamn best to get no civilians. 20%, oh, you're really stretching it now. That's, that ain't good. That's not good. 1 out of every 5. Once you get to 30%, 40%, 50% civilians, once you get to between 70 and 90% civilians, you clearly don't give a shit about the civilian casualties. If these were Israeli schools or Israeli hospitals, and to get 1 bad guy or 10 bad guys, you have to kill 80 civilians, they would never pull the trigger. They do it because it's Palestinians, and they don't, they don't care. They don't care. And their plan now is very clear. Ethnic cleansing of Gaza. They're saying, we want to voluntarily emigrate these people elsewhere so we could take Gaza. So forgive us if we don't buy your, oh gosh golly, we're trying so hard routine for Western media. Because by the way, internally, they're a lot more honest with each other, what they want to do. It's only when they get in front of the media that they have to spin it and put a humanitarian veil over it. But this BBC reporter is not buying it, and he's correct to not buy it. All right, guys, that's the show. I love you guys as always. Thank you for listening. Do me a big favor. Please click like and subscribe. Click that bell icon so you get a notification every single time a video drops. If you aren't supporting the show, please consider it. I get a lot of these videos demonetized because it's very heavy topics. The link's in the video description box below. If you can give $2 a month on Patreon or $5 a month, whatever you can do to help out, I appreciate it. I've never had a conversation with an advertiser. Very proud of that fact. I'm one of the only people in media that can say that. You could also support Crystal Kyle and Friends. That link's below as well. We're going to have Abby Martin on this week. And what else I got for you? That's it. If you want to listen as a podcast, you could also listen to the full show as a podcast over on Spotify and the podcast platforms. And that's all I got for you guys, man. I love you all. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.